Okay, we are recording the session. So the first thing we want you to do is think of a time when you wanted someone else to be reasonable. And this could be someone in your personal life, your professional life, a bill collector, your neighbor. Just think of a time when you wanted someone else to be reasonable. What did you want them to be when you said or thought be reasonable? Probably you wanted them to see something from your point of view. You wanted them to be a little flexible, to be understanding or empathetic, perhaps even bend a rule or understand why you might need an exception. And that's what we're thinking about when we call the session reasonable rigor. This is where Natalie starts talking.
So, yes. So one thing that I want you to think about, Allegra mentioned several of these things, but have you ever worked really hard on something that you were going to share with your colleagues? Maybe it was a video or a document for a class, or maybe you worked really hard to prepare something for your students. And then when you went to send it out, you just forgot to attach it to the email. And it just took, someone letting you know, oh, you forgot to attach this, then you could take care of it and everybody still benefited from all that hard work. It wasn't that just because you didn't attach the email that all of that was for nothing. Same thing, if we were late on a water bill payment or an electric bill payment by a day, we would, expect that the water company or the electric company was not going to cut off our service for a 24-hour late period. So one thing we want to talk about in this session is with teaching online, you actually have more flexibility than you would in a face-to-face class, because when you come to teach a face-to-face class, you and your students only have that room for a certain period of time, and then another class comes in and you're forced to leave the room. And so you're limited on what you can do based on your physical location and how long you have it. But in online, we have lots of options in order to be flexible. Now, that doesn't in any way mean that your academic standards or the rigor in your class has to be easy. And it doesn't mean whether you're nice or mean. It just is about being flexible.
So we're going to first talk about communication. And when we talk about communication in an online class, that means something a little different. So we're going to talk about announcements, but also tone and nonverbals and the way and the speed with which we answer questions.
Okay, so we're going to start with announcements. In an online class, announcements are just incredibly, incredibly important. So I know that you guys have probably all seen professors, or maybe you've experienced this in your own academic career, where there's an announcement up welcoming you to class, and then the next announcement you get is about the final exam. You really don't want to do that. You want to communicate often with your students. You want them to get a feel for who you are, your personality through your emails, and you really, really want to think through your tone. So you guys have an example here, and I know it's hard to read. I know it's really small. But what I want you guys to pay attention to in this announcement is that there's an instructor who's upset about the work he's gotten from his class, and I'm assuming this is male, forgive me, and you're seeing a use of all caps locks. For your students who've grown up in the online world, when you use all caps locks, you're yelling at them. This is the same as walking into a classroom and just starting to scream at your students, and none of you would ever do that. So we don't want to do that online.
Oh, wait, we're not supposed to scream at them?
Well, I mean, you can, Allegra, because we know that's how you are. All right, so go ahead.
It's just funny because it's do not use texting lingo, which in texting lingo, capitals is screaming. So
exactly. So if you want to get the same point across, but you actually want to do it in a constructive way, here's an example from Natalie. And she's telling the students the exact same thing. Think about your grammar. Think about how you're presenting yourself. Be professional. If you need help, this is where you go to get help. If I'm a student in Natalie's class and I get this announcement, I want to try harder. I want to get better. I want to work for it. If I'm in that other instructor's class, I've already given up. I've checked out. Because he didn't tell me how to get better. He just said to do it.
You may have dropped it, actually.
Exactly. Another thing before we move on, I want to say about announcements. Please don't treat this like a flash sale. Don't leave your announcements up from 1 to 5 and if they can't check it during that time, they don't get the information, please leave them up. Once you post them, they stay up the rest of the semester.
Otherwise, your students will think they're going crazy. They're like, I just saw it. I thought it was there.
Or your students who are working or who are in nursing are going to have a harder time getting the information.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to the next examples.
So this is an example of announcement from my class, and you'll notice it's much longer than the announcement that Natalie posted. I tend to post long announcements with reminders. One of our colleagues, Angie, prefers to send 2 or 3 short announcements in a single day. There's pros and cons to each, so you can do whichever works for your style. But I like to use announcements to really give a kind of connective tissue to the whole class. So what does this lesson have to do with the next? What should we be thinking about moving forward? And I like to answer, if a couple students ask me a question by email, I like to just answer it in an announcement, because that means several students probably have that question that wasn't explained clearly in the lesson. I always give them reminders. And yes, I know they're college students and they should be responsible, but they're also taking 5 online classes sometimes, and some teachers have everything due on Monday and some teachers have everything due on Sunday, and it doesn't cost me anything to give them a friendly reminder, and it makes everybody's life easier to get everybody on the same page.
Can we go forward one more, Allegra?
To yours, this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Announcements are also a great place to teach and reteach. I teach history. I would never just walk into a room and just start talking about the Battle of Gettysburg without setting it up. So use your announcements that way, set up your lessons. But also, if you get a bunch of work back from students and it's just not up to the standard you had thought it was going to be, or they just completely missed the point, that's what you're seeing here in this red square. I did an assignment with my class. I got about 25% A's and B's, and everybody else just failed horribly. That's not on them. If only 25% of the class did well, that I explained it poorly somewhere. So this is me re-explaining how to do that assignment. And you'll notice that I don't do emojis. I don't do a lot of, Allegra, what would you say that is? I would say it's fluff, but you would say it's...
I mean, fluff is fine. Yeah,
okay,
fluff
good.
softens the blow. Fluff is better to land on, tastier, more fun. Yeah, it's all those things. It's fluff.
So I don't use a lot of that, but I'm still like encouraging. I'm still approachable. I still want them to do better. I'm not using caps locks. I'm not screaming at them. Just redirecting them.
She's also offering them the chance to resubmit the assignment after acknowledging that because so many people didn't do well, it might not have been explained.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later too.
So when we think about answering student questions, I know that many of us have gotten and or will get questions that we know we have answered already in the course. Sometimes I post something in an announcement and a student replies to that email asking me a question answered in that email, or they ask me something that's in the syllabus. And we have a choice to make when we get a question from a student or when they point something out that doesn't work. And the choice is, do I want to be efficient and get this question out of my inbox, or do I want to make sure the student knows it's always okay to ask me questions they have? So if I get a question that's answered in the syllabus, I don't just write it's in the syllabus. I say, great question. I'm glad you're thinking about it. You'll find that on this page of the syllabus. After you read it, if you still have questions, let me know. That way I'm still creating the custom for them to check the syllabus when they have course questions, but I'm not telling them that they were a fool for asking me a question. You always want to be inviting them to ask you questions in the future. And so these are just screenshots from questions that I've gotten from students, and they ask me things. And the top 2 are things where the student are pointing out that something didn't work or wasn't available. And so I say, anytime you see something like that, do exactly what you did and let me know. Thank you. I'm glad you sent it. I had the link hidden and forgot it. They apologize, these students. They say, I'm so sorry. don't want to be mean. I don't want to be rude. I just noticed this wasn't working. I'm sure the problem is me, but could you help me? And I'm like, no, the problem's not you. The problem's me. You're not being mean. Thank you for letting me know. So I like to encourage them as much as I can. And one-line emails just don't do that. But the good thing about Gmail now is that it knows what you're going to say next. So I don't ever have to type the sentence. Let me know if you have any other questions. Gmail just adds it in at the end of my emails now. So I don't know if it does. Does it do that to you guys?
Yes. It reads my mind.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I would say about that is when you email announcements, you post the announcement and check that box to email also. Just that much of being proactive to communicate with students, I'll get many more responses to an email that I send than I will just student initiating an email to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little reminder that your class is still there.
You still have this class.
Yes.
So we're really here to talk about course policies, and there are lots of course policies that you're familiar with, but some are kind of particular to online classes. So we're going to talk about attendance, late work, discussion board etiquette, extra credit, and academic integrity. And what I want you to notice is that the three of us, Natalie, Misty, and I, we have very different approaches to some of these policy categories, and all of us are giving students room to make mistakes, and all of us are being flexible in a different way. So we are not here to tell you you need this policy or this policy. We are here to give you examples of policies that work and encourage growth in online students. And we put this group together because we don't agree on course policies, so that you can see kind of different points of view. The first is attendance. You definitely need to take attendance.
So this is going to be a little confusing for you guys that are going from in-person classes to online classes. But yes, you still need to take attendance. Yes, it is still a financial aid issue. Yes, it is crucial to students that you do this and you do it in a timely manner, but you have a little bit more flexibility on how you do it. So I take attendance once a week on Sundays. I know that some other professors have different policies on that, but if you've done anything in that course for that week, for me, you get to be present for that week. For those of you who had your courses set up as twice a week or 3 times a week, you can actually go into WebAdvisor and change that so that you're only taking attendance once a week. But you want to make sure that you have some policy that you've stated clearly on how you're going to take attendance. So for mine, again, it's if you've done any work this week, you're present. For some instructors, it's if you've participated in the discussion board. For other instructors, it's if you've turned in this little mini essay. So whatever it is, make sure you have a policy and that you're following it and that you're putting your attendance in a timely manner. We don't want to put all of our attendance in December.
And that your students know what it is. So if your journal entries are your attendance assignment, make sure students know that, so that if they get counted absent, at least they know why. And some students who have had financial aid issues in the past are very mindful of why attendance is important. And so it will cause them a bit of anxiety if they don't know how their attendance is being counted. And so we have different policies. The top is actually from a different English instructor. I just wanted to get some variance in here. It will be recorded once a week. If
that's
you don't,
mine.
Oh, that's yours?
That's mine.
Then maybe the bottom one is Julia's. Here's how you get it. Here's what happens if you don't submit assignments. But we also have different approaches to whether or not we drop students. So Misty, you do not drop students ever. Is that right?
I will never, ever drop a student because I teach history, which is like glorified storytelling. I'm going to save those drops for students for math or for science. I'm not going to take one away from them. I understand that other instructors do, and that's fine. I'm just not willing to make that decision for a student. But Natalie, you're different, right?
I will drop students if they are not participating. If they've missed 2 major exams, by that point, I reach out to them. If there's not some, really quick response about how they're going to get caught up, then yes, I will drop them from the class because I don't see a way that they will be successful.
Sorry, I went backwards instead of forwards. There we go. So it's up to you. And the actual attendance policy for the college is in the catalog if you want to review it. I copy and paste that also into my ICR, but just make sure you're taking attendance at least about once a week and that students know where that comes from. And then just let them know, are you going to drop them or not? Or maybe you'll drop them and maybe you won't, but just give them that heads up. So if they're curious about it, they can find that information.
Can I say one other thing about that? Because I
Yeah.
just was posting my attendance for the second exam this morning before this session. And in Web Advisor, after you post attendance, when you go back and you have your class list, it kind of gives you a summary there of how many class meetings or assignments that students have not been present for.
Mhm.
And then there's an easy way to send them an alert that you don't even have to draft the response. If you click on that alert, it's got an auto, response in there that you can edit if you want. But I just sent one to a couple to some students and I've already gotten a reply back. So those are effective reminders of, hey, remember you missed this assignment and you're still in the class and what can we do to get you back on track?
I agree. I use those Web Advisor reminders all the time. So it's up to you how you deal with late work in your course. We recommend that you have a consistent policy that's worded well and that you don't make exceptions to that policy. So most of us would say a zero tolerance for late work policy is kind of unreasonable at this point and mostly untenable, but it is your decision. But please do not say, I will not take late work under any circumstances, and then take late work from some students. It's better to have a more flexible policy that says, I generally don't take late work. Please reach out to me if you have an extreme life circumstance. Doing the former, telling students you won't take it, and then taking exceptions on a case-by-case basis if they reach out to you is really advantaging students who are brave enough and bold enough and know enough to reach out, even though you say, I'm never going to take late work. So it's better to say, I generally don't. If you think that if something has come up and it's so extreme you can't submit work, let's discuss, is better because students know that you're open to having the conversation. Some students, if they read, I don't take late work under any circumstances, will never ask for an appeal to that no matter what happens in their lives. So my policy is if you want extra time, take it, it's yours. It costs me nothing and it helps them immensely. And also I don't have to keep up with taking 10 points off or who's turning something in when. I just say if you need extra time, take it. So this is posted, this notice is posted above my syllabus or below my syllabus above my course calendar. And it just says you're going to spend several hours per week on the course. The due date is 11:15 or the due time is 11:59 on the due date. You can work ahead if you need to. I can't take the final exam late because it's always due on the last day of the semester. And if you need extra time for something, just let me know. I don't want documentation. I'm not going to get into the business of being the arbiter of whose excuse is valid or whose doctor's note is real or whose medical condition is serious. It doesn't matter. Even if the fact is you had a crying baby or you just wanted extra sleep, to me that's legitimate because that happens to me sometimes too. So you don't have to give me details, just take extra time is my policy, which seems extreme to some people. Is this your policy at the bottom, Natalie?
This is no.
Okay.
This is not my policy.
I snagged some from Julia also. So this person's policy is late work will receive a 30% penalty. There are no exceptions to the policy. So this person built in a little flexibility. So if you had a major life issue happen, then you can still submit things late. But if you want feedback on that late work, then you have to visit office hours. This person is not going to go back and grade things later. And you can still turn it in, but there is a penalty. There's no exceptions to that policy. So there's a little flexibility built in. And so students still, if something happens, it's not a fatal error. Is that yours?
This one's
This is not
mine.
mine.
Okay, this is Misty's.
So I have the strictest policy of anyone in this group. I don't take late work at all for any reason. It just doesn't happen. This is mostly because I am not organized enough to go back and deduct 10 or 20 or 30%, but I do want to give every student feedback. So I don't take any late work, but I have things built into the course where you could entirely miss 1 week and you could still be okay. You can completely, totally just space out and we will figure it out later in the course.
There's Natalie's.
This is mine. So I am more strict for the exams in my class, mostly because the students have to move through at a certain pace, right? Or they're just not going to finish. So that's sort of my hard stop. But even with those, even though I don't take late work, everybody gets one oops ticket. And so I don't care what that is. If it is literally you just forgot that was the test day or you were very ill, it doesn't matter. Everybody gets one. And you have for those up to 2 days that you can take it late. Now I do take 10% off in that case. The other assignments that aren't exams, I give them 3 days to turn it in late and I deduct 10% each day. And it is harder to keep track of the 10%. It does take a little, manual entering in the grade book. But I do like to give some kind of benefit to my students who are getting it in on time. So that's why I choose to do that. And here's what I would say about late work. If you are going to allow late work or an oops policy or something, then it's much easier if when you set up your exam settings or your assignment settings, just don't check that box that says do not accept after the due date. Because if you do that and then you have to go in and reopen exams, it makes it confusing for the rest of the students because they keep seeing this exam is open, it's closed, now it's open, it's closed. So it's once you have your policy, there's a way to set the settings so it works best for you and the students. Allegra.
I was muted, so I was talking to myself.
Hey, Natalie, there's a question in the chat for you.
Oh, yes. Let me see. So I don't necessarily mean 10 points because some of my assignments maybe are only worth 25 points. So in other words, if it's a 25-point discussion board, I just take 10% off, so they would lose 2.5 points per day. But if it were a 100-point exam, then yes, it would be 10 points.
Okay. You point people. I'll never understand. I do reinforce my policies in my announcements. So this is an announcement I sent the day after a research paper was due. And I said in that announcement it was due yesterday, but I will still accept it through tomorrow for full credit, which I know makes some of you shiver. But it works for me. And so I say, if you need to keep working on your essay today and tomorrow, it's totally okay. I posted that because even though I have this very flexible policy clearly stated, and I reinforced it in my intro video, the day this research paper was due, I got like 4 emails from students saying, can I please have an extra day? So it was clear to me that my students maybe didn't trust that I really would take their work late. And it's tough for students in multiple classes to remember who has which policy. So it's helpful just to reinforce whatever the policy is in announcements or reminders, or to make it prominent in your syllabus so that they can help sort out, okay, my history professor won't take late work, but I can drop a grade. My English teacher will take late work, so I should keep working on that. I mean, if you have 4 people who have totally different policies, it can be tough to remember who gives flexibility where. So I just like to remind them that they have that built-in extra time. And then I just say, make sure everything is submitted by this day, because I really cannot and won't take things after the course is over. That's a whole different thing. So let's talk about discussion board etiquette. That's Misty.
Maybe she's muted.
That's okay. I'll start. So you have to
Sorry,
have...
Allegra. I was waiting for you because there's a question in the chat for you.
Okay, that's fine. I'll answer it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So so discussion boards are really critical in an online class. For those of you that are not aware, there are federal standards as to what counts as an online class versus what counts as correspondence. And substantial interaction between students and professors is one thing that makes something an online class versus a correspondence class. So we want to be very clear in our discussion board policies and also our standards of what we are going to do in the discussions. So this is the sample policy that is in the faculty guide. I think the majority of that was taken from my policy. Am I correct about that, Allegra?
Yes.
So you're very clearly setting up what you want your students to do. If you want them to cite things in a certain way, put that in there. You want to make sure that they're all going to approach each other with respect and that you have consequences for anybody that doesn't. I very, very, very rarely have anyone in the discussion board that doesn't meet these standards. So as long as you put them up front, clearly you're going to be okay. I tell my students in the first week that if you wouldn't say it out loud in front of your grandmother at church, don't type it. So if you have a phrase like that that can kind of stick in their heads, that might also help. I want to remind you guys that discussion boards are not something where you set it up and then forget it exists. Because students can get kind of brave behind the keyboard and they can say things that they don't really mean or they say it in a bad way. So if you're not there to catch it early, it'll be kind of a problem for you later. Allegra, did you want to add on to that?
No, the other thing I want to add is that it's a requirement by the federal government that online classes have components that in which students interact with one another. And so most of the time that is discussion boards. Sometimes that's peer revision or group projects, but students have to have regular and substantive opportunities to interact with each other and with their instructor. Now, as long as you are responding to their emails, posting announcements, giving them grading feedback, participating in the discussions, helping them with their assignments, that is interaction with you. But you have to be intentional about building in interaction that they can have with each other. So that's why discussion boards are important, but also why you need to set the standard for how to communicate.
Something I do in my discussion boards that may help you guys is the last requirement in my discussion boards is that they have to ask a question of their classmates. And then when their classmates are responding, they're answering the question that another classmate has asked. That tends to work out a little bit better than just everybody post your discussion and respond to 2 people or 3 people. Because if you don't have them respond to something specific, you're going to get a lot of, I agree with you. This is a great idea. You did an awesome job, without really having dialogue.
That's a good, I like that, the question.
So these are other examples of discussion board communication policies. I like to emphasize that we're a community of learners, so that is a great way to start. Natalie, is one of these yours?
No, it is not mine. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to talk over yours.
It looks like in the chat, someone's wanting you to just repeat that about the question. And also there's a question about basically, let's say there's an inappropriate post in a discussion board. So how what would you do online and how would you handle that?
So the thing I said about the question is my discussion boards have 4 things that you get points for. So one is posting your initial post. One is the content and the grammar. One is responding to at least 2 classmates. And the 4th one is putting a question in your initial post that is directed towards your classmates. So I'll say, ask one question that the readings brought up for you. And you might get some really good questions from your students. I've actually taken some of those questions and incorporated them in the main discussion board post. So that way they have a more organic way to dialogue. Because you've all sat there and read those discussions that are just like, I agree with you. Oh, you're so smart.
Yes.
That's not a real interaction. About an improper post in the discussion board, It depends on the level of,
Are you at an Air Force base?
I live right by the Navy base. Yeah. Sorry, guys. So if there's anything that's like hate speech or slur, which I've never had, but I know other instructors have, I would immediately delete that post. I would reach out to that student, and depending if it was violent or not, I'd probably also reach out to the care team. If somebody just words something in a way that's a little awkward, that maybe could be offensive, but I know it's not what they really mean, I'll jump in and say, hey, did you mean da 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 da? And kind of clarify and soften it as much as I can.
You can
That's
also
rare.
you can also edit students' posts. So if you need to, you can. So what happens sometimes is a student posts something which is either not accurate or misleading or potentially problematic. And really what I mean here is that I had a student once talking about how the earth was flat, and I just has nothing to do with English class, and I don't want you to propagate the weirdness in my discussion board. But 4 or 5 students had replied to them and replied to the real substance of the discussion, and if I delete their post, then theirs are out there hanging. So I honestly just went in and deleted the sentence about the flat earth, which I think maybe was a joke. And then I just sent them an email and I said, hey, I took the sentence out of your post. It was distracting from the conversation. The rest of your post was fine. So you can do that. It's not a great idea to do because it makes students feel weird. But if you tell them, hey, I did it, it's not a big deal. It was just distracting people or confusing them. But yeah, if it's like actually problematic, take a screenshot of it so you can document it for the care team, but just delete it.
And honestly, if you set your policies very clearly up front, it's rare that you'll run into that kind of problem.
And if it's a dual credit student, you can use our care team. It's probably more effective to use the dual credit coordinator or the dual credit director at your own campus, and they can connect you with, or they can send the information to the counselors at that student's high school. And if you are familiar with the counselors at the student's high school, depending on how much you've worked there, you're welcome to contact them as well. So if you have something concerning about a high school student, I would work with the dual credit coordinator and director. Our care team can do things, but like I said, it's typically less effective because those students feel kind of a little separated from TCC. So we're going to talk about extra credit, which is also something that makes people squirm sometimes. It's your choice whether to give extra credit. The top policy here is Natalie's.
Yes, and I just want them to know up front, because I will not at the end of the term, if they come up with a, I don't know, let's say 78, and they just for whatever really think they need to have a B, I don't offer anything at the end. So I want them to know up front that there are a couple of opportunities built into the course that I provide, and that's their opportunity to take advantage of that, and there won't be any more. And everybody has a bad day, right? Everybody maybe missed something. So this gives them a chance to not let that one thing ruin their average.
I give students extra credit for attending. Our campus has webinars every semester that are focused on civic engagement and information literacy. Obviously, those topics are both related to English and composition. So I give my students extra credit for attending those webinars in the form of dropping a minor 0, so like a discussion 0 that they might have. So they have 6 opportunities. Very few students go to more than 1 or 2, but some students will go to all 6. And they have to go to the webinar, and then at the end they get a link just like you're going to get, where they fill out a form to verify their attendance, and they get asked a couple of questions to kind of make sure that they were listening and understanding what the presentation was about. It's not a quiz or a test, but it is a couple of verification questions to make sure they watch the webinar. They can join those live and participate in the comments, or they can watch them recorded later on YouTube. And that's my only extra credit that I offer students. So if I do have students like Natalie at the end who say, is there anything I can do? I really want an A. Say, I'm sorry, I gave extra credit opportunities. I can't do anything beyond that.
And the other thing, Allegra, I think obviously from your example, my extra credit is hopefully helping them to relate to the material in the class. So it's not just, some random thing. It's built in a way that helps them engage in the material better.
You don't ask students to come watch your band, Natalie?
No, but if I had a band, then I would do that.
So if you're considering extra credit, which again is a great idea to build in a little flexibility and to help soften the blow if students miss a grade and you don't have a grade drop policy. So just consider what connects to your material and what would be meaningful for students. Make sure your policy is clearly explained, and that includes clearly explaining how the credit gets added and when. I add extra credit at the very end, and so I have to let students know it will not show up until the end. Give them options so that it's not one and done, and make it relevant. Make it relevant and meaningful so that it does connect to the course material and it is kind of an enrichment activity. You want to avoid things that are exclusionary. So things like giving blood or voting or donating to a charity, all of those have been extra credit opportunities that faculty members have attempted to offer in their classes that we've had to step in and say, you can make them one of many options, but obviously not everybody can donate blood. Obviously not everybody can vote. Especially if you have dual credit students, they're not old enough, not everyone's eligible to vote. We don't want to get into why someone might not be. And not everybody has money to donate or to buy a book. So if you wanted to give them a list of 10 things and they can choose 2, those activities could be among the 10, but some of them still need to be inclusive activities that anybody could do. And you also want to avoid excessive extra credit. If I can miss all 3 major exams and still pass because there's so much extra credit, that's too much extra credit. And then you run the risk of students not really mastering the course objectives.
Natalie, did you mention museums when you were talking? I'm sorry, my daughter was doing something and I kind of missed something.
I did not mention, but that's a good point. Do you want to talk about that one, Misty?
Sure. So I know that a lot of us in the previous life that we led before COVID had things like going to a museum or going to listen to a speaker or attending some event as part of our extra credit options. We really want to think through those things right now because some of those things just aren't open or available. And so we don't want to ask students to do the impossible to get extra credit.
And even if they are open, I don't know that I want to encourage students to go to them.
That's a good point too.
So, I mean, just be creative. There are virtual museum walkthroughs online. There are documentary films that are available for free online. Obviously, they can watch, if it's like a drama class, they can watch stage performances online. I know Hamilton is on Disney Plus. Not that everybody has that, but you just want to be creative and give them options that are inclusive. And yes, it's probably, to be honest, the webinars I give my students extra credit for, I'm often either the host or the presenter of the webinar. So in a way, I am giving students extra credit for listening to me talk, but it's relevant to the course. So if you're a musician and you want to give students extra credit for watching live or recorded music performances and one of the options is something you perform, I don't think it's problematic. It's problematic if you give them extra credit for buying your book or giving you money. That is a problem. But I'm
sorry, I was referring to a history adjunct that actually had people coming to watch his band for extra credit.
Maybe his songs were all about history stories.
No, they weren't.
No? Okay. Well, you've also had someone who gave people extra credit for buying her book. So
yes, we've covered all the bases in my department.
Looks like we have somebody that raised their hand. Do we want to go ahead or wait till the end?
No, yeah, they got a hand raised. Let's answer.
All right. So, Janae?
Hi there. I know there's been discussion about not giving students too much work or busy work or, overwhelming them now that we've moved to online. But if we originally taught face-to-face courses, I know that it was, we were doing in-class dialogue and not, having discussion posts. So is it advised that we tone down some of the other activities or grading assignments that we would normally offer in order to not, kind of carry along what we're doing, plus add virtual things for them to interact with that we need to, like discussion boards? Or are there any thoughts on that?
Yes. So I would say that students shouldn't have more than 3 assignments in a lesson, and they shouldn't have more than 15 or 16 lessons in a course. And I would never have anything else due the week that a major assignment is due. So the week of a test or a research paper or a major essay, they don't have discussion boards and they don't have other assignments due. But a typical lesson for me is reading a chapter, some stories, and the lesson materials in Blackboard, watching a video, and then probably doing 2 assignments. One of them might be a discussion or a journal, and one of them might be a paragraph or a writing assignment. And more than that is probably too much.
I think this is something I really struggled with when I first started teaching online.
Okay, so
because I wanted them to do everything. So what helped me was reaching out to somebody who I knew had a really great online class and just looking at their syllabus and looking at their pacing to see what they were doing.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about academic integrity, and obviously if your students are submitting work, then you need an academic integrity policy in your syllabus. You can access the policies from our campus faculty guide. They're in Blackboard, and I can show you how to get to them in just a minute. So if you have tests, then we're not talking quite about the Proctorial policy yet. But in terms of plagiarism, we added a self-plagiarism policy because we have students who took Comp 1 last semester and they're retaking it because they failed or they had to drop it, and they're not allowed to submit the same work from last semester into this class. So we explicitly added that to the existing district policy. And so this is our Connect Campus plagiarism policy, which is extremely relevant for people who have students submit essays. I put everything through Turnitin or SafeAssign, but honestly, the best protection against that isn't policing them after they turn it in. It's writing original prompts that really can't be Googled and can't be found online. So I'm not going to ask my students to write a paper on the theme of the yellow wallpaper because that essay is in 500 places online. I'm just going to have a little bit more creative of an assignment to dissuade them from Googling it. But Natalie, you have a Proctorial policy in your class, and that is also in the faculty guide, which I will show you all in just a moment. I know that a lot of you will be using Proctorio.
Yes, and what I would say about Proctorio, from using it the last couple of years, the things that I have learned are that you have to be very detailed in your instructions for students. And there are a wide variety of settings that you can use with Proctorio. So, look at the setting options and use those that work for the way that you're testing your students. So, for example, I do let my students, when they're taking lecture exams, I let them have a 3x5 note card. So that means I know that they're going to be looking down at their work area. So I give them instructions that before they begin the test, they have to take their webcam, or if it's a built-in laptop camera, and scan their desk area. That way I can see there's nothing there but that note card. It depends on the settings that you want to use. I would say this, there's always going to be issues with technology. And a couple times, well, maybe a few times a semester, I have a student who got into the exam, got started. Sometimes they may only get a few questions in, sometimes they get almost to the end and something happens to their internet service, and it's not their fault, right? There was a internet connectivity issue, or they got dropped or something like that. And each of those times, so my tests are a pool of questions. So if a student got in, they got through 5 or 6 questions, they got kicked out, I don't have a problem with resetting that attempt for the student because I know that the chances that they're going to see those same 6 questions again is very unlikely. If a student gets to, I have 50 question test, if they get to 44 questions and then they get kicked out, I'm usually going to say, you know what, I'm going to calculate your average based on the number of questions that you answered. So however many you got right out of 44, we're going to call that good because you were able to complete the majority of the test. But the other thing that I will say really quick about Proctorio, if you haven't used it, is I would recommend in your instructions, have the students before every test, even though they've already done it, click on the Secure Exam Proctor, because what that does is make sure that the extension they have is up to date. I mean, things are updated so often, and I don't know the technical goings on behind there, but there will be times that they will be asked for a password. That should never happen, and what that means is something's going on and their extension is not up to date. So if they click that Secure Exam Proctor every time, you'll know that it's updated before they try to take the test. And the other instructions I give my students is if you have any issue, click on the little Proctorio Shield icon, which is the extension, and that will open up a chat session with Proctorio. So those are my helpful hints.
Great, thank you. I'll just show you really fast. If you go into Blackboard and you click on this training tab at the top, this is actually kind of a treasure trove of stuff. So there's a faculty guide and student guide and setup guide for Proctorio in here, but also the Connect Campus faculty guide is here, and you can get these course policies on Proctorio and technology. So we also have statements in our syllabi about what technology is required for students before the semester starts. So there's the plagiarism policy if you want that. And in the ICR section, we have a required technology statement. So you have to have a computer, you need Adobe Reader, you need Microsoft Office, here's how to get it. You need a webcam and a microphone because those are essential for Proctorio. And then here's what we put into every syllabus. If we use Proctorio, we put this in the ICR so students are aware of it beforehand. So all of that is in the faculty guide, and you're welcome to just copy it right out of there. And again, you just go to you log into Blackboard and click on training.
And one other thing, if you're teaching students who maybe originally didn't sign up for an online course, so they may have some questions and concerns about online proctoring. If you go to Proctorio's website under the frequently asked questions, they have some statements about their security and how they adhere to all FERPA laws. So that may be something that helps to share with your students if they have concerns.
So the last thing we really want to talk about is just some ways to build in flexibility and to do what works for you. And again, the idea here is to make it so that a single mistake or a couple of small errors on the student's part aren't fatal errors that cost them their grade or cause them to fail. So if you're not interested in extra credit or you don't want to extend deadlines, some other things you can do, consider dropping the lowest grade. That could be for discussion boards. Misty, you dropped the lowest test grade, right?
Yes, in my sophomore level classes, yes.
So that means if I do well on all of the unit tests, then I can skip the final exam?
Absolutely.
All right. So that's a good way to build in flex. But that also means if I had an emergency and missed test 2, then I can still make an A or pass the course because I can do well on the rest of the tests. That doesn't give me too much flexibility because I still have to do well on everything else. I open things early, so I do close things about a week after they're due and students don't have access to them anymore, but I do open things several weeks early, and that just makes sense. Some students can work ahead, and I tell them if there's a discussion board, you're going to have to come back to it to reply to your classmates, but if you want to read ahead, especially some students know that they are more deliberate readers and it might take them some more time, so I open things in advance so they can start reading ahead. Natalie, you talked about your OOPS ticket. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think we covered it, but I would like to talk about optional meetings.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I think so. I do, even though my class is, 100% asynchronous, we don't have a meeting time. I do find that students enjoy an opportunity to have a review session or a question and answer session with me in a live setting. So every semester I have several dates that kind of correspond with that week that they're going to have a major exam. These are completely optional, and I give students an opportunity. So I have them different days and different times. Each one is a different day of the week, a different time, so that hopefully I'm covering all different schedules. But I record these, so any student that can't attend, if they wanted to watch the video, they can. They don't get graded for these. Occasionally I will offer this will be an extra credit opportunity, but they don't have to do it live. I'll say a word or something in the middle of the recording, so if they watch it after the fact, they can tell me that word and I can give them the points. But oh, the ones who can't attend live, I have a little Google form that if they want to send in specific questions, and I'll make sure and cover those, so that way they feel like they have an opportunity to participate.
And our last idea is if you want to let students redo assignments. So that could be a set in place. If you turn in the first essay, you get grading feedback and then you can redo it, or it could be case by case if it just seems like you know what you're doing, but you misunderstood the assignment. I'm going to let you go ahead.
+14692680582 is now exiting.
I love Teams so much. Is just the final option for just giving students an opportunity to redo. And this is reinforcing learning. So if they have to redo the paper, they're not getting away with anything, but they do get an extra opportunity. I let students do that in Comp 1. I don't let students do that in Comp 2. So it's really up to you. I see a couple questions. I am going to post the link to the sign-in sheet.
I got you, beat you to it.
Oh, okay, great. Erlene, we do, if I'm saying your name wrong, please tell me. We do, some of us have office hours online. I use Google Meet and I'm just available to students live, but for the most part, my office hours are by email. So I just say, I'm going to respond to you within 24 hours, but on Tuesdays at 10 a.m., I'm going to respond immediately. And if you want to schedule a time to talk using Google Meet, we can talk one-on-one. Does anybody else have a question that we can help with? So these videos are available in Stream. Once the video is, so they're available in the team itself, which you're all members of. They're also available in Microsoft Stream. If you don't know how to get there, if you just go to Office 365 online and log into your TCC account, Stream is one of the many Microsoft apps listed there. And Austin is working on getting them all into YouTube, into a playlist, so you can access them there. So if you have questions, we're happy to stick around and answer them. But it looks like most of you are ready to go to the 11 o'clock session, which I would encourage you to do because it's going to be great.
Thank you for attending. We appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And let us know if you have questions this semester.
Allegra, I have a question.
Okay.
This is Linda Davis, and I shared the link to the YouTube videos in a chat with some of my people in my department, and Hannah Harrell wanted to know when they would be available for streaming, because she said she was waiting to hear from you guys to share it with other teachers. So did you just say it's ready now in Stream?
If it's recorded, it's in Stream.
And do you prefer her sharing that or the YouTube?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. All right, I told her I would ask, so I asked.
Yeah, she's welcome to ask any of us. I don't know who that is or who she wants to share it with, but she's welcome to send me an email if she has questions.
I think she's the professional development coordinator at Northeast. I'm not really sure that's her title, but she's at Northeast.
Okay, yeah. They should be in Stream now, but if she has problems, just have her reach out to me.
I will, thanks.
Thank you. So the 11 o'clock session is on questioning strategies, I believe. And if you want to head to that, you're welcome to do that. If you have questions and you're hanging out to ask us, you're welcome to do that as well. I'm going to stop the recording though.